Hello plant lovers, it is Matthew in Melbourne welcoming you back to my channel. I grow cold, cool, intermediate orchids here in Melbourne, Australia without a greenhouse, without any heat or humidifiers or grow lights, just me indoors or outdoors or out of the pool. And plant lovers, I found it quite difficult to find the types of orchids I could grow and then information about them for my type of growing. So if that is of any interest, do hit subscribe. I post once a week and my ramblings are somewhat amateurish, but I'm getting there. And apologies for the slight turning down of energy I feel today. I have just had COVID, as I'm sure many of you had. And I'm sure those of you who had it realize you do take a while to get your vigor and vim back. Anyway, lucky me that my dearest other half is in fact a respiratory specialist. So great care on hand. Not that I needed it, but I did use it as an excuse to go orchid shopping. Yes, plant lovers, I know. Here is a tray of 7 plants and I had secretly to myself and on my inside voice promised not to buy any orchids. In fact, no, I didn't. I thought it might be a good idea just to focus on the ones I had rather than acquire more. But plant lovers, having clawed my way out of the depths of COVID, you know, I just felt I needed a little lift. And what can give you more of a lift than buying orchids? It was, of course, accidental. The Orchid Society that I'm a member of had a plant sale, which I knew about for months and months. And it was last weekend, and I just thought, I'm not even sure if I have the energy to go. It was the first day I was allowed out, and I was testing negative. And I thought, you know what? Why not just be among orchids and my people? And boy, am I glad I went, because I met so many growers who grow orchids exactly as I do here in Melbourne without greenhouses, which is the most important thing. So many of these orchids can be grown outdoors all year under cover, so protection from the rain, but subject to our low winter and nighttime minimums, which can get to and have been hovering around the 4 to 5 degrees centigrade mark, which is around 41, 42 Fahrenheit. Cold, not quite freezing, but chilly. So it was a great opportunity to meet other growers and just learn from their experience and the type of plants that they are selling, which gives you an indication of whether or not, obviously, they can grow in your climate. And some of these, reading the information, you might think, I'm not sure that could manage Melbourne, but here they are, living proof. And so once again, all I can say is if you have the opportunity to find local groups wherever you are in the world, and I'm sure there are orchid groups everywhere, just about, it is the best place to find other growers who know your environment and what will thrive, and also have plant selling occasions where you can buy divisions, seedlings, etc., many of which we'll get to, I have never seen anywhere else before. So plant lovers, I think without any further ado, we should go through these one by one and I can tell you what I've bought, perhaps why, and why I'm so excited. And there is some very interesting synergy between what is here and one of my previous videos. Just saying. And in fact, that seems like the perfect segue, plant lovers, to look at the first orchid in this pot. And it's still got its sticker, meaning I have bought it. And it is Disa draconis. Yes, a Disa orchid. Now, you might have seen, and I'll link it below and above, I made a collaborative video with the wonderful Rachel of Gardening in Disa a couple of weeks ago. And the concept was her top 5 orchids and my top 5 orchids. Now, one of Rachel's was the Disa orchid, and she had some beautiful hybrids with amazing coloured flowers. And I'd heard of Disa orchids before, and in fact, I'd seen Rachel's videos as well. So I knew of them and thought to myself, must see if I can find Disa orchids. The species is South African, and a lot of South African plants love Australia's climate, not dissimilar in many regards, particularly on the west coast. But anyway, so I thought, obviously, there's bound to be Disa orchids in Australia. No, plant lovers, I couldn't find one. And so when we made our collaborative video a few weeks ago, and Disa happened to be one of Rachel's number 5, it reminded me again that I really feel I need a Disa in my life. Again, searched, nothing, nowhere, ever, until this weekend. Now, This Disa is not like the Disas that Rachel was showing. This one is the species. So this is as it is found in South Africa, and draconis has white flowers, and they're not particularly flashy, I have to say. And given any other circumstances, I probably wouldn't have bought this, except that it was you still are, a Disa orchid, and I just really wanted to have a go at one. Anyway, so here is my Disa orchid, draconis, white flowers. It's a terrestrial species that grows in South Africa. Now, looking at the environs in which it grows, it is not dissimilar to a lot of Australian dryish, sandy, scrubby conditions. So particularly in the west coast of Australia, where I spent my childhood, quite sandy, quite sunny, very Mediterranean climate in and around Perth, the city there. And the areas where this grows is basically sandy, sunny scrub. So the Disa hybrids that Rachel is growing are hybridized from swamp growing Disa species, whereas this one is a dry, scrubby growing Disa. So interesting to remember that that baby is not going to want to sit in a tray of water. So it is a terrestrial, and it is deciduous, or you could say a herbaceous perennial. It is going to grow up, it's going to flower, it's going to die down, rinse and repeat. And as you can see, it is starting to shoot now. So I would imagine in its native habitat, it has very dry, quite harsh summers, and then it's going to get autumn rains, which is probably going to trigger the growth. We are now midwinter, you can see that it's growing, and it will bloom more than likely in late winter, early spring, and then come summer, it's all going to die down, rinse and repeat. And the grower I bought it from said that they do multiply and clump up. As you can see, there are three, no, actually 3.5. There's a little mini plantlet there. So I'm hoping for a nice little clump of Disa draconis. Very excited to have found my first Disa orchid. And as we're at this end of the tray, let's look at this plant. Now, you might be able to guess, oh look, ta-da, it is a nobile type of Dendrobium. And actually, I can see there, and here, little flower nubs forming, which is very exciting. Now, the reason I bought this is nobile types do really well in my climate because their species ancestors have quite a range of habitat, but often very high altitude in the Himalayas, and they can really deal with our winter nighttime minimums, and they like plenty of sun in winter, which we can offer. It is a beautiful sunny winter's day today, even though the maximum is somewhat chilly. Now this hybrid is called, can you see that? It is Dendrobium yukidaruma, the king. And look at that flower. So it's white with a very deep, what are we going to call that? Maybe purpley burgundy, who knows, we'll have to see. Center to the flower, should be gorgeous. And this is what is known as a Yamamoto type of orchid. And I'd kind of heard that expression before, but of course decided to look it up. Turns out, in Japan in the mid-century, there was a famous Dendrobium hybrider called Jiro Yamamoto, and he spent his whole career hybridizing nobile type Dendrobiums to give vigorous growth, ease of care, fantastic flowers, and they're generally called Yamamoto type of orchids because they all came from his nursery originally. So isn't that wonderful? Very healthy looking division. It has got obviously 3 canes, 2 of which have got flower buds. So I'm looking forward to this doing its thing. Now, nobile types like a dry winter, and they like a sunny winter, more sun in winter than in summer. And I will hold off really watering or feeding it much at all until I start to see some new growths in spring. So a dry-ish winter. I don't let them dry out 100%, but very much on the dry side. I look forward to showing you that when it is in bloom. All right, let's spin the magic box and look at our next cab off the rank, orchid number 3. Look at that, and let me turn the little flag so you can see. Ta-da! And it is, well, not very descriptive, an Epicattleya Lilac. Now, I think perhaps we're all familiar with the Epicattleya type called René Marquez, which has a beautiful flower, and it's very commonly found in cultivation, and I think most orchid sellers around the world have it. I have never seen an Epicattleya other than René Marquez for sale, and I've certainly never seen one that's sort of lilac with what looks like white tinges to the lips. So I am really thrilled about that. Also thrilled about the fact that the grower grows this cold, i.e. outdoors all year, no heating, so exactly the same as me. Cool, cold winter nighttime minimums, plenty of sun, relatively hot, dry summers. So I'm very excited about that because it's something that can live outside all year and is not going to have to come inside for the great seasonal turnaround. Healthy looking plant, lots of new growths. And given that that's quite a mature division, wouldn't be at all surprised if I were to get blooms. So Epicattleya, and of course Epicattleyas are a mega blend of the two types of Epidendrum and Cattleya. And they met in beautiful harmony to produce this type. But as I said, I've never seen anything other than René Marquez for sale, so I'm interested to see what this one might look like. Outdoors, plenty of sun, dry-ish winter, but not completely dry. We'll see what happens. Next cab off the rank is this. Look at that healthy looking baby. Isn't that wonderful? And this is a hybrid between two Oncidium species, which is called a primary hybrid when you cross two species. And this is a cross of Oncidium montanum and Oncidium crispum, which you can see there. Now, both those species parents are Brazilian, but montanum comes from higher altitudes, so it can take cooler temperatures. Crispum slightly lower altitudes, but this grower again grows these cool in Melbourne, which means outdoors all year undercover, but with no heating, so protected from the rain, but subject to cool winter nighttime minimums. And look how healthy and gorgeous that is. Now, I did notice there's a little nub at the bottom there, which is probably just a new growth. I am presuming blooms are going to come from that leaf joint there with the pseudobulbin in there, as most Oncidiums do. We shall see. It is coming into spring. I wonder if this is going to be a spring bloomer. Hybrids will often flower twice in a year, spring and autumn, but this is a primary cross between two species, so who knows? Species ancestors tend to only flower once, so we shall see. Anyway, I will keep you up to date with that. The montanum flower is yellow and very dancing lady looking, and the crispum is sort of a browner, more burgundy, but is fragrant. So we should have arching spikes of fabulously coloured flowers with fragrance. Let's watch that space. Next cab off the rank. Oh, and we're getting tangled up here. Let's disengage. Look at this. And once again, there's the flower flag to give you a clue. This is something that was in Rachel's top 5. In fact, it was her #1. Yes, it is Cattleya purpurata. Look at that division. And look, we've got two fabulous new growth points coming up here. A wonderful, healthy looking plant. Must confess though, I have just realized I already have Cattleya purpurata. Oops. This is why you should always finish your orchid inventory before you go shopping. I would say 2/3 of the way through, and I just forgot that I already have this. But never mind, I'm still excited to have another one. This is a division of a plant that has been grown in my conditions, so hopefully it's predisposed to being fabulous and blooming. And we can see that there are spent flower spikes on 2 of the growths, and this looks like the last mature growth, which hopefully should flower. And in Melbourne, these tend to bloom in sort of mid-ish summer, around Christmas time. So we'll see what happens with that. Anyway, Cattleya purpurata, very happy to have you in my life for a second time. And isn't that a coincidence that 2 of Rachel's top 5 orchids turned up for me basically the next week? As we know, outdoors all year, bright sun, lots of direct sun, but not midday, really burning direct sun, but really strong light, and a slightly drier winter, but not dry. Okie doke, on to the next one, which I am equally as excited and happy about and interested to show you. Look at this somewhat rangy plant, otherwise known perhaps as leggy, but it is Dendrobium subclausum, variety subclausum. Oh, I don't know, sometimes taxonomists, I mean, Must things be that complicated? Anyway, now you can see from the little flag, it is an orange Dendrobium. And what a fabulous looking plant it is. Lots of new growth coming up from here. Plenty of activity on the canes. And curiously, this is something I perhaps would not have ever considered looking at, because this is a species orchid native to Papua New Guinea and the Moluccas Islands, which are the islands between Papua New Guinea and Indonesia. So that's pretty tropical, plant lovers. But this is a high altitude orchid and it likes cool, cold temperatures. How interesting that you can get cold, cool growing orchids from Papua New Guinea, but you know, very high mountains in the middle of Papua New Guinea and amazing biodiversity. So why not, I say. Anyway, I don't have a really orange Dendrobium. This one has amazingly orange flowers. The grower was, again, a local person, and she was very enthusiastic about this plant, saying that the flowers last months when it does come into bloom. So I'm very much looking forward to that. And in fact, the other thing that was wonderful about this orchid species society plant growing extravaganza was that so many of the people had watched the channel, and a lot of the sellers had as well, and said, oh, you must look at this, it's a cool grower, I grow it just like you. So it's fantastic to meet so many people who had been watching this channel and enabled me to cut to the chase to look at things that they grow exactly as I do. So I am loving the look of this Dendrobium subclausum. Now Dendrobium we all know means sort of tree of life, life-giving tree, but subclausum sounded like a grammatical name, and I don't know, it just didn't seem that glamorous. Turns out, of course, Latin, so the second part of a plant's name often refers to a characteristic of the plant or its country area of origin. So in this case, subclausum, sub means under, and clausum comes from closed, so it means that the flowers don't open properly. So now we know, subclausum. Should you ever come across that in your Latin again, you will know exactly what it means. So the flowers aren't going to open, but they're brightly coloured, last for a long time. Can't wait to see what happens with this one. Which brings us quite charmingly to the very last plant, and look at this. It is Dracula bella. Now, I've heard of, obviously, and seen images of Dracula orchids, but I've never seen one for sale or available. So there is a Masdevallia specialist who has Draculas on their site, but they are never available, never in stock, because I think obviously they're so fashionable and desirable. There is a picture of the bloom. And as it's very similar, in fact it was considered a Masdevallia for some time, very similar growing conditions to Masdevallia, I thought, why not? There it was, and this was from a grower also who watched the channel and who grows things exactly as I do, climatically, so I'm very happy to have this in my life and to see how we go. Now, the difference between this and a Masdevallia, I guess, is that Dracula bella can flower from below the plant, so this is a great one to grow in a basket or something with quite large perforations, a bit like Stanhopeias in fact, so the spikes can come down. So this is in a sealed pot, as you can see. And I think once the weather warms up, I'm going to get a smallish wooden basket to grow this in. As it can grow outside all year, I don't have to worry about bringing it in, and I can't do that with hanging baskets, obviously. So for me, in this case, this is something I can grow successfully in a basket outside all year. So Dracula bella is, I think, Colombian. They are fairly high altitude, cool growing, and described as cespitose. A cespitose epiphyte, and I thought, what is cespitose? It sounds like a sewage issue. I've got to dig up the cespitose. No, what it means is tuft-like. So it means that it kind of grows in tufts on tree branches. So it's an epiphyte, but it obviously creates quite a mound of foliage. So there we go. Now, no pseudobulbs like its Masdevallia cousins, which means it's a thing that doesn't want to dry out. It has fairly consistent moisture all year where it grows, fairly consistent humidity on the lower light spectrum. But again, I think like Masdevallias, it's all relative. You've got to feel your way. These leaves, I think, will burn very easily if they get too much direct sun. So I will tread carefully with that. I'll start off in quite a shady spot. And the Dracula bit of the name comes from the flowers that do look dragon-like, and Dracula actually means originally, the Latin root of that is dragon. So Dracula bella means little dragon, literally, but in Romanian, where Dracula allegedly came from. Dracula means now the devil. So there you go. It's kind of a mega mix of dark, bloody, dripping flowers. Anyway, that's where the name Dracula comes from. I am very much looking forward to seeing if I can make this one thrive and bloom. I might make a video of potting it in a basket so we can all watch its progress. Quite a nice, healthy looking sized plant though. So to me, that looks like it should be flowering size. We will see. I just need to give it some space to allow any flower spikes that want to come out to come out. So there we are, plant lovers. My excuse for buying all of these was that I had COVID and I just needed something to live for. Well, now I've got to find a spot for them, including the second Cattleya purpurata that I own, which was a foolish mistake, but I am tinkering away through completing my orchid inventory, and if I'm brave enough, I might tell you at some point what the total was, but it's really important when you start to get a few orchids to have a list handy, which means when you're in a situation like this, you can very quickly check to see if you've got them. I should of course known that I have Cattleya purpurata because it's a pretty classic species type that does well in this climate, but anyway, a moment of madness I have forgiven myself for. There we are, plant lovers. Thank you very much for joining me. I hope wherever you are well. I hope things are fine and dandy in your orchid growing world. I am very excited to now go and try and find somewhere for all these to live. Very excited to see what Disa does for me, to see if I can get Dracula Bella to flower, all these wonderful things. It's so exciting to have new plants and new challenges in one's life. So plant lovers, do hit subscribe if you want to follow my continuing adventures. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you for finding me. Feel free to leave comments below if you have experience with any of these. Very interested to hear what you might have to say, particularly perhaps with Disa draconis. Be interesting to see if anyone grows that and what your experience might be. So plant lovers, until next week, take care wherever you are, and I look forward to seeing you next Friday.